Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something I think a lot of you listening will recognize. That feeling, you set these big goals, you're all fired up.
Yeah, totally motivated.
Exactly. And then, well, life happens, right? Motivation kind of disappears and those big plans just sit there.
It happens all the time. We aim high, which is great, but maybe the approach needs a tweak. And the material we looked at today, it offers a really interesting perspective on making change actually stick.
It really does. We've been digging into this great conversation from the English Leap podcast. Now, their focus is language learning, specifically English, but honestly, the ideas, they apply it to pretty much anything.
Absolutely universal principles.
Right. So our mission today is to unpack those key takeaways, those little insights, the aha moments, basically, things you can actually use to build habits that last without, burning yourself out.
And what really stood out for me was this focus on the small everyday structures, not massive overhauls, but simple systems.
Systems that support you, yeah, instead of just relying on willpower, which, let's be honest, comes and goes.
Exactly. It's finite.
Okay, so let's jump into the first big point they made, which I found fascinating. It's about identity. How who you think you are affects what you can actually do.
hmm It sounds a bit backwards sometimes, doesn't it?
It really does. For ages, I wanted to speak Spanish,
Mm.
but deep down, I kind of just thought, oh, I'm not really a language person, you know? That was my story.
And that self-perception, that internal narrative, it's incredibly powerful. It can genuinely hold you back. If you don't see yourself as the kind of person who does X, it's really hard to consistently do X.
Totally. Like
Mm.
trying to be a morning person when you just aren't. And I had the same thing with writing. I'd want to be a writer, but I wasn't, writing.
Right.
The shift only happened when I stopped waiting to magically become a writer and just started, well, acting like one,
Yeah.
even if it was just like one sentence a day.
And that's the key insight they shared, isn't it? You don't wait to become, then act. You act first, consistently, in line with who you want to be. And slowly, you start to actually embody that identity.
It feels different. So for you listening, if English fluency is your goal, maybe try shifting how you see yourself. Instead of I'm trying to learn English, maybe it's I'm an English speaker who's getting better every day.
That small language shift internally can make a huge difference. They had a great analogy putting on new shoes. Feels weird at first, right?
Why a bit stiff?
But you wear them, you walk around, and eventually they just feel like your shoes. It's the same with taking on a new identity through action.
Okay, so identity is foundational, but then practically, how do we start building these habits, these systems?
Hmm.
The next idea from the source was, well, almost counterintuitive. Start small, like really small.
Yeah, comically small, almost.
Totally, because I used to do the opposite, right? 2 hours of study every night, and that lasted maybe
Right.
2 nights.
Uh-huh. The classic go big or go home trap. It's just not sustainable for most people, for most things. It leads to burnout.
So they talked about this 1 minute strategy. Commit to doing the thing for just 60 seconds, like read Spanish for 1 minute.
And the funny thing is, often, once you start that 1 minute, you might keep going. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. But that first tiny step gets you over the initial hump.
It creates momentum, doesn't it? They use the snowball analogy, starts tiny but keeps rolling and picks up speed.
Exactly. Consistency beats intensity, especially at the beginning. Just showing up, even for a tiny bit, builds the foundation.
So for English learners, they literally suggested start by reading just one sentence a day.
One sentence. It's so easy, your brain can barely object. There's almost no resistance.
You're tricking yourself into it, kinda.
You're lowering the barrier so much, it's effortless to step over.
Okay, so we're starting small, tiny steps. But how do we remember to even do the tiny step? This is where cues come in. This made so much sense to me.
Right? Cues. These are the triggers, basically. Things in your environment or your routine that automatically spark an action, often unconsciously. The cue response loop, they called it.
They gave a perfect example. Every morning, making coffee. Boom, automatically reaching for the phone. No thought involved.
A classic autopilot habit.
Yeah.
But the clever bit is hijacking that cue.
Yeah. Instead of fighting the coffee phone link, you rewire it. So kettle goes on, and maybe instead of the phone, you grab your English notebook.
You're using the existing trigger, but changing the response that follows. It's much easier than trying to eliminate the trigger altogether.
Or linking it to something else you already do, like finish brushing your teeth, then immediately listen to a 1 minute English podcast clip.
That's called habit stacking or piggybacking. You attach the new desired habit onto a solid existing one. It makes it almost automatic over time.
Super smart. They even suggested using your phone's lock screen. Change it to a prompt like, name 3 things you see in English.
Such a simple cue, right there where you're looking anyway.
Little nudges.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've got identity, tiny starts, and using cues. What's next for building this robust system?
The environment, where you actually do things. This plays a huge role. They said it can be your silent teammate or your biggest saboteur. I like that.
Me too, because it's so true. They told a story about having a journal for English notes. Nice journal, but it stayed in a drawer.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. But the moment they put it on the nightstand with a pen, boom, it just naturally became part of the evening routine. No extra willpower needed.
Because the environment made it easy. It reduced the friction. If the good choice is the easy choice, you're more likely to make it. Less motivation required.
So for English learners, practical tips were like, leave your headphones right by your toothbrush. Makes it easy to grab them and listen while you get ready.
Or stick Post-it notes on your mirror. Maybe with a question like, what did I learn today? Or how do I feel right now in English?
Yeah, or even just keeping your favorite English YouTube channel open in a tab on your computer.
Yeah.
It's just there, visible.
You're essentially making your environment speak English back to you, setting up constant, subtle reminders, and making the tools readily available.
Makes total sense. Your environment is nudging you in the right direction. Okay, so things are set up. We're doing our tiny habits. How do we know it's working? How do we stay motivated? Tracking comes in here.
Right, tracking. And they had a really helpful way of framing it, not as pressure or like judging yourself.
Which is how I used to see it. Like, oh no, I missed a day.
Yeah, but they frame it as building momentum. Seeing the progress, even tiny progress, is motivating in itself. It's like proof that you're moving forward.
They use a lovely image, planting seeds and seeing those little green shoots. That visual feedback is powerful.
Definitely. They shared an example of just putting a check mark on a calendar for doing, say, 10 minutes of English practice after a week or 2 of checks.
You want to break the chain.
Exactly. That visual chain becomes its own motivation. You see the effort you've put in.
And it doesn't need to be fancy, right? A sticky note, tally marks, a simple app. Just something to make the progress visible.
The visibility is key. It fuels that feeling of accomplishment and makes you want to keep going.
And importantly for language learners, they said, track the engagement, not perfection. Track the 10 minutes you spent reading or the 5 minutes you tried to speak, not whether it was flawless.
Precisely. Focus on the consistent effort, the showing up. That's what builds the habit.
Okay, now this leads nicely into something we mentioned earlier, willpower. We often think we just need more of it. If I fail, it's because I'm weak-willed.
Ah, yes, the willpower myth. The source material really pushes back on that. Willpower isn't infinite. It's more like your phone battery.
Okay.
It gets depleted throughout the day with every decision you make. What to wear, what to eat, what tasks to do next. By evening, that battery is often pretty low.
That makes so much sense. They shared how for their podcasting, they stopped relying on willpower to get started. Instead, they focused on prep.
Exactly. Setting up the mic the night before, having the outline ready, getting the lighting right, all done in advance.
So when it was actually time to record, there were fewer decisions, less friction, less willpower needed because everything was ready to go.
That's the core idea. Prepare. Make it easy for your future self. Reduce the decisions needed in the moment when your willpower might be low.
And that applies directly to English learning. Get your notebook out the night before, queue up the app, maybe even write down the one sentence you plan to practice.
You're removing those little barriers that can stop you when you're tired or unmotivated. You're relying on the system, the preparation, not sheer force of will.
Systems ask for prep, not perfection.
I like that. Okay, so we're prepping, we're tracking, things are moving. What about acknowledging when we actually do the thing, even the small things? I know I tend to just move on.
Yeah, it's easy to just tick the box and rush to the next thing.
Yeah.
But they really highlighted celebrating the small wins. They called them deposits into your self-belief account.
Oh, I love that. A self-belief account. That's good. Isn't it? It reframes it. They gave an example of literally saying nice one out loud after finishing a short recording. Might feel silly,
A little bit, maybe.
but that small act of acknowledgement reinforces the behavior.
Yeah.
It tells your brain, hey, that was good. That felt good. Let's do that again.
So for English learners, after you do your 5 minutes or read your one sentence,
Yep.
maybe just pause, smile, give yourself a mental high five.
Or actually say, hey, I did it. Proud of that. Anything to mark the moment and associate the effort with a positive feeling.
It strengthens that positive feedback loop. Makes you more likely to repeat it.
Exactly. You're wiring the habit in with positive reinforcement.
Okay, these are all brilliant, practical strategies. But what about the bigger picture? What keeps you going when it feels like a slog, when progress seems really slow?
Yeah. This is where the why comes in.
Right.
Connecting your daily system to a larger vision, a deeper reason. Not necessarily a rigid 10-year plan, but like an internal compass.
Understanding why you're doing this in the first place. They shared their own motivation for learning English wasn't just exams or grammar.
No, it was about connection, right? Connecting with people globally.
Yeah. And knowing that deeper reason, that why, helps you push through when the daily practice feels, a bit tedious or difficult.
It provides the fuel. The system is the engine, maybe. But the why is the fuel that keeps it running, especially over the long haul, through the inevitable bumps.
So for you listening, if you're learning English, really think about your personal why. Go beyond, I need it for my job, or I have a test. What's the feeling you're after?
Is it confidence when traveling? Connecting with family members? Understanding movies without subtitles? Personal growth?
Write those deeper reasons down. Keep them somewhere visible. That emotional connection is incredibly powerful when motivation dips.
It really is. That resonance sustains you when things get tough. It's the anchor.
Absolutely. And just quickly, they also mentioned some useful vocabulary at the end of their chat, words like flip, insight, momentum, cues, saboteur, willpower.
Yeah, really good words to understand and maybe start using to sound more natural when you talk about these kinds of topics in English. Worth looking up.
Definitely. So, okay, let's try and wrap this up. The big message here, the core idea we've pulled from the source, is really about shifting focus away from just goals towards building sustainable systems.
Systems that support lasting change.
And we've touched on some key parts of that system. Shaping your identity, starting ridiculously small, using cues, optimizing your environment.
Tracking for momentum, preparing to reduce reliance on willpower, celebrating those small wins, and connecting it all back to your bigger vision, your why.
It's a lot, but even just picking one or two of these to focus on could make a real difference, couldn't it?
Absolutely. If you listening can think about just one habit you want to build and apply maybe one of these ideas, that's a fantastic start.
So here's a final thought to leave you with, something to maybe chew on. What's one tiny, almost insignificant shift you could make to your daily routine starting tomorrow that might just create the biggest positive ripple effect for you over time?
That's a great question to ponder.
It really is. Well, thank you for digging into this with us today. We genuinely believe you have the power to create the changes you want to see,